Good morning. I want to continue with this, the things I was talking about yesterday um, with Bonhoeffer and this pastor Niemoeller at some point. But I want to tell you where I was this morning because it's really relevant. Um, I was going over Hebrews a little bit, Hebrews 13, which is a book by God's grace I've been able to memorize. And so I was saying some of that, earlier, and I got to the part in Hebrews 13 where the writer is trying to tell them, don't be carried about by various and strange doctrines. It's good that the heart should be established by grace, not with foods. So he's making that point, and he said we have an altar from which those who serve the tabernacle have no right to eat. And he's talking about the altar of Christ, that Christ has been sacrificed for us. The whole point of the book of Hebrews was, it seems to me the Jews in that area, wherever they were, we don't know, maybe scattered around, but they were having a problem thinking Jesus had been God. God wouldn't have suffered, and because he makes the point over and over again. By death, he has established a new covenant. It was necessary for him to suffer in bringing many sons to glory, that the author of their salvation be perfected by suffering. Though he was a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. He made that point over and over and over, that it was necessary that a sacrifice should be made. By one sacrifice, he has perfected forever those who are being sanctified. So, and he, not that he should offer himself often since the foundation of the world, for then he would have had to suffer often. But now once, at the end of the ages, he has appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. Those kind of ideas all through Hebrews. So in the end, the last chapter, he says, so let us continually offer up the sacrifice of praise, the fruit of lips, giving thanks to his name. He says, but don't forget to do good and to share, for with such sacrifices God is well pleased. But the point I'm trying to make is, he's comparing the sacrifices that are necessary under the law. And now he says, but let us continually offer up the sacrifice of praise, the fruit of our lips that give thanks to his name. So, and then I went back to the verse I was meditating on yesterday. I mentioned how Bonhoeffer had his disciples meditate on one verse of scripture for half an hour. I haven't done that yet, but Psalm 84:5 I was looking at yesterday, where the psalmist said, blessed is the man whose strength is in you, who sets his heart on pilgrimage. And I thought, I wonder what that pilgrimage word is. So I looked it up. It's the word from which Selah comes from. Selah all through the Psalms. And, I've always thought it meant pause, it's and meditate on these things. Well, actually, the root is to lift up, to exalt. It's the word from which highway comes from, which is this pilgrimage word in Psalm 84, who sets his heart on the highway, the raised up road. And it comes from this word to exalt, to lift up, Selah. Actually, in the Brown Drivers and Briggs Hebrew lexicon, which I've read for 30, 40 years, the first meaning for Selah is to exalt, and then in parentheses, to lift up the voice. So I thought, gosh, you mean that word really doesn't mean pause, it means extol him. Oh my goodness, yeah, you pause a minute and extol him. That's what you do when you pause. And again, it's this thought of sacrifice, of praise, the fruit of lips that give thanks to his name. So I want to be one of those who has my sacrifice as the sacrifice of praise, the fruit of my lips, that I give thanks to his name. There is something, as we have talked about, the connection between the tongue and the heart. Whatever I say is connected to what's in my heart. And if I speak the words of God, if I speak the praise of God, it's going to change my heart after a while, because what we speak, we become. The tongue is the rudder of the whole ship. it guides it wherever the tone goes, wherever the rudder goes. That's where you go. So, and I'm going to get back to. I know I wanted to say just a few of those places where this pilgrimage word, or what it's really from, is the highway, which it never meant a street in the city. It meant a highway, because the highways were always like embankments. It meant partially embankment or ladder. It's the word for Jacob's ladder in Genesis. It's this idea of a raised up road which had to be outside the city. And that's the highway of holiness in Isaiah 35:8. Wow. To extol, this whole idea of the highway, the pilgrimage, it's the word in Proverbs 4:8 for, extol wisdom, treasure wisdom, for she will be good to you. Whatever, I forget the wording there. But in Psalm 68:4, extol him who rides on the clouds. This is all from that word, highway or pilgrimage. So if I'm one who's blessed because my strength is in him, and who sets my heart on pilgrimage, I'm setting my heart on the high road. I'm setting up my heart on extolling my voice, lifting up my voice. Extolling the Lord by lifting up my voice. To lift up is the word highway. So I want to go back to just a minute before I end, about a couple minutes, about this man, Pastor Niemoeller, who spent 8 years in a Nazi prison camp. He had an encounter with Hitler that he shared while he was in prison with this man who wrote his book, Leo Stein. Leo Stein was a Jewish man who was in prison with Pastor Niemoeller for a while, and just the witness that Pastor Niemoeller had. I just want to know how to carry my heart. That's the reason I'm reading these guys, is because in their days there was evil around them that they couldn't fathom, that no one could fathom. And he's talking. I want to read you just a part of this. His conversation, how he describes his conversation with Hitler to his fellow prisoner. Oh man. So he's talking to Hitler as one of his. He served with Hitler in World War I. I told you yesterday he was a war hero from World War I. This Pastor Niemoeller. And so he had a relationship of some sort with Hitler, and he knew that Hitler respected him as a war hero, right? Because he had fought for the fatherland. This was all big stuff. So I'll read you the first part, and we'll continue tomorrow. But he says, he goes into Hitler's office. And what year was this? Oh, I need to tell you that, but I won't do it today. But I'll tell you tomorrow. Hitler says, well, first, Niemoeller has realized that the Gestapo was in churches writing notes in shorthand that the pastors were preaching from the pastors' sermons, and then taking them out and arresting them. This had started. So Niemoeller asked for an audience with Hitler because of this, and he says, I started to take up your time, he says to Hitler, but it happens. It's just for the welfare of the church that I've come. And so he says, maybe you don't know what's going on. And he told him briefly about the pastors being arrested. And Hitler says, I shall have to disappoint you. All this has happened with my knowledge and approval. I've permitted it in order to fulfill my promises to the churches. The measures were necessary to secure the close connection between the church and state that you yourself greatly desired, and to make the church a powerful institution in the National Socialist Reich. Okay, so he said, when I heard this answer, I knew that all my doubts and fears were confirmed and that all my pleading would be useless. And I felt that it was an insult to my intelligence that Hitler would reduce himself to such a cheap reply. So I said, are you aware, Reich Chancellor, that what you call measures of protection for the church means that the church will become nothing but an instrument of propaganda for the National Socialist movement, and that the clergy will be solicitors for the National Socialist government and expounders of the National Socialist doctrines as religious principles? How can you expect us to do that? Do you really think that we're so contemptible that we would surrender the sacred faith given to us by God and accept any kind of political ideology in its place? So Hitler says, you're mistaken in believing that this would be harmful to the church. The National Socialist ideology is more than a mere political program. It's a worldview comprising everything of importance for mankind, including religion. And so Niemoeller says, Christian doctrine is not dependent on any time or occasion. It is God's word. I'm looking for I've got one more important point to leave you with. So Hitler goes on and he says, what prevents you from recognizing that I have supreme power over the church and its doctrine? Jesus Christ was only a man and a Jew to boot. Why shouldn't I, who am more powerful than Christ, this is unbelievable that this man said that, and who am able to be much more helpful than he, why shouldn't I have the right to establish a new dogma for the church? Now I'm going to continue this tomorrow. I don't want to make this long, but my point is I want to read you how this man carried himself through all of this, in the midst of all this evil. I'm going to read you one more line of this author. In prison, he says he was watching spring happen, a little flower come in and start blooming out in the courtyard, which he got to go to once a day. It says, and we knew that here was something beyond the power of evil, that following the decay there would be green growth again, that even the Nazis could not stay the processes of nature. Now, this is the kind of oppression these people were living under. That they would talk about, even the Nazis can't stymie the processes of nature. There's going to be grass that comes up, and there's going to be flowers that bloom again. So I want to learn. I know there's a movement of God coming that's going to be glorious, and we're going to be busier than a one-armed paper hanger, as my friend used to say, because people are going to come to Jesus in our time like we've never seen. But at the same time, I want to learn how to carry myself, my heart, in the midst of evil that I see around me now, and it's going to increase, I believe, before Jesus comes back. Love y'all. Bless your day.